And as we head to the NFC South here, Wes, this is a very interesting division, I think, from a standpoint of, I think there are a lot of question marks entering just about a lot of this, right? Does Derek Carr have anything left in the tank? Does Baker Mayfield have anything left in the tank? He is going to be throwing to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, for crying out loud. It's not like he doesn't have receivers to throw to. Then you look and you say, okay, you've got this Falcons team that has gone all in now on Desmond Ridder. Is he a guy that they can move forward with? Or are they going to be looking in the quarterback market because they've realized that he was not the guy for them as they move on? And then, of course, we have the rookie in Bryce Young that goes number one overall to the Panthers. And so a very interesting division. I think a very fun division from just a speculation standpoint, but I do think there's going to be a lot of figuring out with a lot of these teams.
Yeah, and look, I think New Orleans is probably the rightful favorite, at least going into the season, simply because if you look at the quarterbacks, Derek Carr, obviously the most proven of the four starting quarterbacks in this league. However, Pete Carmichael, this is his fifth offensive coordinator for Derek Carr as a pro, and I think like 9 seasons. So usually that first year, if you look at the numbers, 22-40 as a starter in those previous 4 seasons with the first-year OC. Now, a lot of those were on some bad teams in Oakland. But, you know, I'm sure he's going to be motivated and obviously feel like he's wanted in New Orleans because he clearly wasn't here in Las Vegas. But you know, you're asking, you have a favorite here in this division where Dennis Allen, the head coach, last year's 7-10 was his career best record. So I still think that there's a little bit of doubt on New Orleans. And is Michael Thomas the same player he was 3 years ago? He, you know, took less money to come back, but he's had injuries. He had that suspension when he got sideways with Sean Payton. How long is Kamara going to get suspended for what happened out here during Pro Bowl week a couple years ago? So, look, I think that this Saints team is the rightful favorite, but, man, I just don't know with the first-year quarterback. So I actually gravitated toward the number 2 choice, and that's the Dirty Birds of the Atlanta Falcons. Not that I'm totally sold on Desmond Ridder, but I like the moves that these guys made, especially on offense. They're going to be able to run the ball. They were one of the best in the league at running the ball behind Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, who finally played like a first-round draft pick at tackle on the right side last year. You have Algier, who is a 6th-round pick, who has a 1,000-yard rusher. You add Bijan Robinson. You'll still use Cordell Patterson a little bit in that Debo role, but I like getting Jonnu Smith, who worked with Arthur Smith in Tennessee as his tight end when Arthur was the offensive coordinator there. That's going to allow them to get Kyle Pitts the football, and that's what Atlanta has to do on offense. Got to get this kid the football. Line him out wide, put him in the slot, put him in a tight end formation, get him all around the field. He is a mismatch for most defensive backs because he is such a large, strong wide receiver. And then they got out of the salary cap hell in Atlanta, and they spent the money. They spent it on defense. Now they spent it on some veteran guys, Calais Campbell, Caden Ellis from the Saints, David Onimata. And they also spent on a defensive coordinator. Ryan Nielsen comes in. He was poached from the Saints. I think that he's probably an upgrade at this standpoint over Dean Pease, getting a younger guy, getting some energy in there. So I expect Atlanta to be better defensively. They were actually the best rated offense in the division, believe it or not, despite the fact that they had Mariota and then Desmond Ridder start the final 4 games.
Yeah, you get Jesse Bates as well on the defensive side of the ball, and then they're going to see if there's anything left in the tank with Jeff Okudah as well, a guy that was very highly drafted and hasn't really lived up to expectations so far at the corner position. But listen, everyone saw the talent at least coming out of college, and maybe the change of scenery, maybe the change in coaching, maybe just him getting some of that pressure off of being in the city where he was drafted could be, you know, he didn't have to be first round talent basically at this point because they got him for nothing. And now you look at a guy that even if he can just play kind of at league average, which he's been below league average, he can just play at league average. It's a pretty good win for them. Yeah.
And he probably had his best season in Detroit actually last year because he was injury free. But yeah, we'll see if he can give them something in the secondary. I like the fact that this Atlanta team, by the way, and you see on that graphic, 4th in the NFC South. That means they get the last place schedule. And I think that's going to matter in a wide open division like this. So, yeah, I'm looking at strength of schedule pretty hard with this team. And I just think that they're very good on the offensive line. They're one of the best offensive lines in the league. I mentioned Lindstrom and McGarry, also Jake Matthews on the left side. So they can run the ball. And if Desmond Ridder can develop a little bit, now they kicked the tires on Deshaun Watson. They kicked the tires on Lamar Jackson. They decided to go the economy route here and give Desmond Ridder a chance to be the quarterback for this team. So I like what Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot are doing. And I like the fact that they play that last place schedule because of the tiebreakers, whereas you have Tampa Bay that is kind of, in no man's land right now. Which direction do they go? They got to play that first place schedule with Baker Mayfield at quarterback and a lot of aging veterans that might be looking for their next move and a coach on the hot seat.
Yeah, and that's not a lot of faith in this squad, certainly from a futures market standpoint. We talked about scrolling all the way to the bottom to find the Colts and the Texans in the last division that we talked about, but you can right there when you scroll to the bottom are the Bucs at 80-1 to win the whole thing. 80-1 on the Panthers as well. 65-1 on the Falcons and 35-1 on the Saints. And Wes, people are probably going to think I'm crazy whenever I say this, but if you like to collect lottery tickets, right? One of the teams in this division is going to make the tournament. That's just how things work.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of these teams doesn't have to necessarily be one of the better teams in the league. And getting in the tournament is really the only thing we're looking for here. And then at that point, you can start hedging off of some of these tickets. And who knows, maybe one of these teams has turned into a juggernaut over the course of the season. We see this all the time, teams that we underestimate. And next thing you know, they figured something out. Of course, the Falcons could be that team. The Saints could be that team. And so you look, and I wouldn't talk anybody off. If someone said, hey, I'm going to put a Falcons 65-1 Super Bowl ticket in there. If you think they're going to win the division, they're getting in the tournament, and then once you get in the playoffs, weird things happen sometimes, and who knows, maybe Desmond Ridder does live up to some of the hype and some of the stuff, and now with all those playmakers around him and some of these defensive guys that they went and picked up, and maybe Okudah plays a little bit better, things could all gel for a team like that, and you have a lottery ticket in your account.
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, just kind of back to the Bucs really quickly. You look at the roster, and it's like, okay, there are talented players here. You still got Mike Evans. You still got Chris Godwin at receiver. I think Rachaad White is an upgrade at running back over Leonard Fournette at this stage of his career. But the offensive line's got some issues with Tampa Bay, and that is very much a concern. They couldn't run the ball at all last year. I think they're going to struggle again, even with the new offensive coordinator. It is Dave Canales, who comes in from Pete Carroll's staff, replacing Byron Leftwich, who was let go at the end of the season. But this Tampa, look, they went all in. With Brady in that limited window, and you can't say it didn't work. They got a Lombardi trophy and two division titles.
And it worked.
But now this is when you pay the price, I think, in Tampa.
Yeah, I do wonder, as you mentioned, with some of these guys that they can still get something for. If they look up and we're, 7-8 games into the season, they can see the writing on the wall. Do they try to collect some assets for some of these guys that have a little bit left in the tank? A Mike Evans, a Chris Godwin, whatever it might be, whoever ends up bringing the most for them. It would not shock me at all to see a different version of this Bucs team for the final, let's call it 6, 7, 8 games of the year than what we see at the beginning. Because again, I think that they're going to be poor. And if the poor plays out, from a franchise standpoint, it probably is best to get rid of some of these older dudes. And if you get anything in return, it's a good thing for the franchise.
Yeah, no question about it. Meanwhile, just to touch on Carolina real quick, I like the hire of Frank Reich. I like the hire of Vivero as defensive coordinator. Now, can Bryce Young answer those durability questions? We shall see.
Yeah, with the Panthers, I look at this team, and I think they're kind of underrated good. And certainly if you can get even just average play out of Bryce Young, you kind of look around and you start to see DJ Chark is in town. Terrace Marshall, who, by the way, if you believe, I understand it's everyone looks awesome season when it comes to these reports from training camp, but everybody's saying that he's finally kind of taken that next step and looks more like a pro receiver. Apparently, there's a lot of rapport with Adam Thielen already, who might play just kind of a glorified tight end role there for this team. But again, a guy that apparently Bryce Young has had a ton of success throwing the ball to here early on, and they did sign Hayden Hurst as well. Miles Sanders was spent. So on the offensive side of the ball, it's a pretty good offensive line, and there's some decent little playmakers there. And if Bryce Young can just be what everybody thinks that Bryce Young is, which is a very accurate quarterback, I think that this team, with the defense that they've got, can probably win some games, Wes.
Yeah, this is one of the better defenses in the division. A lot of talent on that side of the ball, especially on the front four. I
do have an over on 3,500.5 passing yards for Bryce Young. We know he's cleared the first hurdle, which is he's going to start from day one, which is the one thing that we need if we're going to hit something like that. So if you break that out, if he can play, he just needs to average about 233 yards if he can play 15 games, which that's kind of what we're aiming for.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.